Welcome to Advent of Code Day 2. Today, we're tasked with analyzing some unusual reactor reports to help determine which have safe levels to run. In part 2, we get a bigger problem space by loosening the restrictions a bit. Our puzzle input is a list of number arrays. If you need help parsing the input string, check out my video on day 1. Let's think about the logic before we get into the code. We have a list of numbers, and we want to find the differences between each number. From there, the rules are that the differences can be all positive or all negative, but not a mix of both. The size of each jump must also be between 1 and 3. Let's look at our test input. Given the rules we just described, we can see that we should expect 2 of these to pass. Starting out, we'll filter over each report and then return the length of reports that meet our criteria. To test whether each jump is safe, we'll first store a reference to the initial number. After that, we'll start iterating over the remaining numbers. At each jump, we'll calculate the difference between it and the previously stored number, named last. If the difference is outside our tolerance of 1 to 3, we can stop calculating and mark the report as unsafe. But if it's within our tolerance, we set our last reference to the current number and continue on to the next number in the report array. Doing this for each report, we can see that 3 of them are marked safe. But since we haven't added our code to check for a consistent change of direction, this one is marked as safe when it shouldn't be. Let's add that code now. Before iterating, we'll use math.sign to get the direction of change between the first 2 numbers in the array. At each iteration, we'll ensure that the sign of the difference is the same as the sign we stored at the beginning. This ensures that the differences in the report all continue in the same direction. Now we can tell that this report actually fails at the second number and can mark it as unsafe. Running our new code against all reports, we can see correctly that only 2 of them are marked safe now. Part 2 introduces a tolerance, meaning that if our report contains an unsafe jump, we can remove a single number from the report to try to make it safe. As you can see, for some reports, this makes them safe. And for others, no matter which number you remove, the new difference still doesn't meet our criteria. Again, we'll filter the reports for safety and return the final count. I'll also split the code into functions and jump between them. You can always find links to the full code in the description. My code for part 2 takes a slightly different approach from part 1. Because I found this new method easier to reason with in regards to what we're actually trying to accomplish. The sign calculation should now subtract the last number from the first instead of subtracting the first 2 numbers. In some cases, we may remove the first or second numbers for having a different sign than the report as a whole, and in those cases, the calculation from part 1 would cause issues. The next thing we want to do is get a list of differences for each report. In some cases, this does perform additional operations that aren't strictly necessary. But as I mentioned earlier, it's easier to reason with for the next step. After calculating our differences, we want to find out at which index, if any, the diff array fails at, meaning at which index the number is either too large or in the wrong direction. If the result is -1, meaning no failing index was found, then we can return true for that report and move on. And again, we can see 2 reports match the simple check. However, if a failing index was found, then we can remove a number from the report and check the new diff to see if it passes without that number. And actually at this stage, we don't even need the original numbers anymore. We don't really care what they are, since we're testing the differences between them, not the numbers themselves. Since we need 2 numbers to calculate a difference, and we could remove either of them when rechecking the report, we need to try 2 lists when reevaluating, one without the left number and one without the right. So this merge function will do exactly that. Whenever we encounter a failing value, we can simply add it to one of its neighbors to tell us what the new difference would be, and then remove that neighbor. This is equivalent to removing a number from the report and running the diff calculations, but without needing to modify the report itself. In cases where there is no neighbor, such as the beginning or end of the list, we simply drop that diff entirely. After these new diffs are calculated, we can then test each one to see if it passes or fails. If either of them pass, we can then mark the report as safe since it's within our tolerance of a single bad jump. Doing that for all reports, we can see now that 5 of them pass, and that's the answer to part 2. If you want an easy runner setup for advent of code in TypeScript, check out my seed project on GitHub. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you found these animations helpful and what day you want to see next.